Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new normal. I'm your host, Lisa Davis, aka Litecoin Lisa. I'm going to have my Litecoin shirt on today, and my big square hat. We are going to be talking about pre-crypto tokenization of gold with my dear friend, I am for I am. This was pretty eye-opening when he started talking about this. I wasn't aware this happened. So we're going to get a little history lesson and see how it ties into the future. Right after this, give us a like and share the video. Welcome, welcome. I am good to see you. I didn't mean to surprise you or scare you.
I'm ready.
You're ready. You're so ready.
Just messing with you. Oh, wait a minute. I got to drink my tea. I can't afford the $20.80 coffee anymore. Well,
oh my gosh.
Let's see. It's $20 for the government to pay for all of our government, $5 for the debt, and then $5 for the coffee. So
yes,
going down to tea for 50 cents.
You know, tea made a big difference in this nation one time. There was a party I remember about that had something to do with tea. So funny that you mentioned the coffee. This weekend, I went to a baby shower for my deceased sister. The only child is having his first baby. And so Mom and I drove 3 hours to Talala, Oklahoma. Never even heard that. And went to the baby shower, and we were early. So we stopped at this little darling grocery store in Talala. If you've ever been to the Talala grocery store, say hi to the official greeter. He's very nice. And have something to drink there or eat. And Mom, I guess, has only drank coffee at home. And so I went to grab her a Starbucks, just a cold one, whatever. And she goes, "Oh, no, $4. Oh, I would never pay that." And I'm like, "Mom, it's like $6 or more in Oklahoma City." I'm like, "That's normal. That's a normal price for coffee." She was like, "Oh, that's horrible." And then she didn't finish it all. So she's like, "I'm going to take it home." But this is the world we live in.
My
precious $6 coffees. Yeah.
Well, when I spill coffee, I usually weep a few tears, and because it's like liquid gold for me. I love it. I love it so much.
It is a precious commodity.
And I used to be Mormon and didn't drink it. Wow, was I missing out?
Really? I didn't know that.
That's a whole nother story.
I didn't know they didn't drink coffee.
Yeah, no caffeine.
No caffeine. How do they get so much done? Lord. Can you imagine if they did start drinking caffeine?
I have mostly nothing but good things to say about the whole Mormonism experience.
Really?
We'll have to do a show.
I would love to do. I'm so ignorant about that whole culture. And I have some friends that were raised that way. And it's interesting to see like some of the choices they make. And I always wonder how much of that is like just their parents specifically, or if it's a culture thing. But
they're big on education. You need the education to get the big bucks so you can have the big family. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's part of it. But yeah, it's a cult. Sorry, people who are watching, it's Mormonism.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, I think most legalized religion or religions that focus on legalism are,
yes.
Or beliefs. Doesn't even have to be a religion. Let's just say beliefs that focus on legalism, which is following the rules and, all that.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent like that.
Yeah, we're just trying to do an introduction. Well, I'll be right back for I am and talking about.
Well, we got a big show here, so I'm going to roll up my sleeves.
Okay, roll up your sleeves. We'll be right back. Give us a like
information
and share the video.
So that was the end of the e-gold thing, and that's how it went. The end.
And that's the whole thing. Yeah. The whole thing. I want to say hi to JB Rants and Aquarian Done Napping for being our first 2 guests
Oh, nice.
in the comment in the live chat. And I always encourage people to join in the live chat, ask questions, because we do see those comments while we're live. And there's great community there, and you can share a lot of information there as well.
I must admit to the audience and to those in chat, I get derailed when I start looking at the chat.
That's fair.
I lose my train of thought.
Yeah.
Little ADHD happening.
I get it. It's all that coffee you're drinking, I bet.
No, don't blame the coffee. Remember, it's tea. It's tea today.
Tea tonight.
I can't afford it.
You will be on point tonight then. So I was kind of excited when you sent this. I was not aware there was a pre-crypto tokenization of gold other than the derivative BS, and what they've done with gold and silver in the past. So walk me through a little bit of this.
Yeah, let's go to the screen share.
Okay.
Kind of like the magic mirror.
The magic mirror.
So eGold started way back in the 90s. This is before blockchain, before even 9/11 and whole banking laws that came out of 9/11. This goes way back. And the principal founder, brilliant man. And I listened to one of his podcasts of an interview of him. It was 4.5 years ago. And he was a medical doctor, an oncologist. And he was traveling. He picked up a book, a libertarian book. And I mean libertarian like capital L, like libertarian, not Libertarian Party. That's little L. It was, I think it was a Roth. Which one was it? I think The Road to Serfdom, Hayek. Anyway, so he kind of became a born again libertarian and realized that our dollar system and what we're doing to ourselves is just ain't right. Just ain't right. Wrong on so many levels. And he came up with this idea of eGold. And so he claims that had eGold been successful, there would have been no Satoshi Nakamoto and no Bitcoin, which might mean that there would have been blockchain. And if that were the case, Lisa, you wouldn't be Litecoin Lisa. You and I probably wouldn't be doing these shows. Think of all the people and friends that we've met along the way through blockchain. That would all disappear if his point were true. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about eGold, how it became successful, what happened to it, why did it fail, what was his takeaways, what did he learn from it, and what we can learn from it. How's that?
So good. I do have to push back a little bit, like we had talked to just before we got started. Like there is, and now I'm countering my own comment because I remember what your response was. We still need a world without lawyers and a way to have contracts actually stick and have consequences and no chargebacks in contracts either. But you had said, yeah, but we're looking at this from the future, looking back to the past. He's talking about when he was in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
And it turns out he went on the messaging boards during the whole cypherpunk movement and was arguing with them a little bit. So it's fascinating. So anyway, eGold, look at their logos here. Worldwide money, elemental money. It's better money, eGold.
Elemental. So it's not eGold like email. It's elemental gold.
Yeah. Well, it's like ES and email. Yeah. It's
it is.
Yes, it's tokenized. It's gold itself circulated electronically. I don't know if you can see this right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the middle here is their website. I went back to the Wayback Machine, and this was from July of 2007, what their website looked like. Now, remember, this was like, .com bubble and post bubble, and people were looking at ways to be able to transact on the internet. Merchants couldn't afford to process and handle credit cards because they didn't have the good credit rating, especially small businesses. And their website here, like, look at this: immediate payment, no waiting for checks to clear or credit cards to be made. Right? Sound pretty familiar, right? When it takes you back.
Yeah,
Fees lower than credit cards or competing payment services. No chargebacks, get paid, stay paid, unlike credit card payments. All these things that were long before crypto, and it was definitely peer-to-peer kind of thing. Buy or sell e-gold from two independent exchange services who best meets your needs. It's fascinating when you go back and look at their history and what they were able to accomplish and do, all before Bitcoin. So let's move on.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Light Shadow is in the chat, and he says, is it a gold peer-to-peer, or is it another middleman?
It's a middleman.
Because where does the custody come in, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that
that's right. They had vaults, and they had vaults where they store gold, and there were big audit firms that would audit the gold and verify that the gold was there. People would store their gold with them and then pay down their gold by using it in their currency. And that's essentially what they were doing. And we're going to get into the mechanics of it here in just a second.
Okay.
But he's right. He's right. There was a middleman. So this is, again, pre-Bitcoin, and we've learned the dangers of having a middleman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was launched in 1996. The three founders, well, the two primary founders was this Dr. Douglas Jackson, Barry Downey, who was also an attorney, but he was like a benefits lawyer attorney for like employee benefits, and then Reed Jackson. I don't know who Reed Jackson is.
I'm sure they're descendants of Andrew Jackson. Sorry, that's why I giggled when I heard the Jackson name.
Good one. So anyway, this was Barry Downey, and I still call him a pioneer in asset tokenization.
That's awesome.
He helped create the gold-backed payment system. This is pre-blockchain. There's this gentleman, Reed Jackson. Don't know who he is. Think he's Melbourne, Florida, but I wasn't able to find much about him, even though he's listed in the final settlement or the court case that they lost. And then here's our principal. He is the principal director and founder and CEO, Dr. Douglas Jackson, brilliant mind. And these two pictures of him are kind of interesting. The one on the right, he's showing his ankle bracelet after he was convicted of 3 charges, felony convictions. And this picture was from Wired magazine. But what a brilliant mind. And think about it, this guy was a medical doctor and oncologist, and then got into the world of finance and created something that the world had never seen before. And certainly the cyberpunks were looking at what he was doing or what they were doing, and took some, I think, probably visually advice. They saw what happened to him as well, and they learned from that. And that's how we got our blockchain and Bitcoin that we have today, is a direct result of e-gold.
Well, and that would really encourage Satoshi to never become known.
That's
If you're being arrested for innovating and creating a path to trade, that's insane.
True. Sad. We're going to get into that. It's going to be really interesting. So they basically did this. They store gold and they created a currency, but they really didn't want to call it a currency, but they did. They got opinions from attorneys that said what they were doing, they were okay. They didn't need a money transmitting license. They didn't need these other things or license, things in the 90s to do what they were doing. And they charged as low as 0.5% or 1% on the transactions. So imagine you had a website and you were a small company and you couldn't afford to have, like MasterCard or Visa or American Express on your website. But these folks offered something different, which again had no chargebacks. It was a 5%. And essentially, Lisa, if you were selling me something and I wanted to buy something, we would agree on the price, and it wouldn't matter if you were here in the US, and let's say, and I was in, I don't know, Uruguay, and was working with pesos or something like that, we would transact in gold. And you would tell me how many grams of gold you wanted for your product. So it didn't matter that you were in dollar world, and it didn't matter if I was in peso world. We were in gold world transacting. And you would tell me, oh, well, it's, I don't know, 18 grams of gold. And I go, okay. And we would agree to that. And that's how it would be transacted, would be in grams of gold. So the gold, those grams of gold would move from my account to your account. And that's how it worked. So it was truly digital backed currency. It was electronic. Fascinating. In 1996, this has started.
Yeah. Did they have chargebacks?
No, there were no chargebacks.
No chargebacks. Okay.
And like I said, merchants had problems because they couldn't, use credit cards. And but they had a gold-backed reserve. And this is where it gets really interesting. Wow. Who would have thunk that? Wow, a dollar backed by gold, or a transaction that's backed by gold? Wow. So all he was doing was he had stockpiles of gold, and he stored gold for people, and people would send them gold. They would drop off gold at exchange houses for him, all these different ways and he created a currency that was backed by gold. And it was called e-gold, basically. And it was working well, actually. And he did this with a $1 million startup, mostly with his own money. And I keep saying he, even though there were others who were working on this, but it was primarily him. And unlike, say, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, when they started PayPal, they burned down $300 million before they became profitable. That's PayPal. PayPal took $300 million of investment before it became profitable. This guy started with just $1 million. He was certainly he was underfunded. Wow. He was undercapitalized. But that's what he did, was he created a currency in these gold reserves. And people trusted it because they knew it was backed by gold. And they had all of these audits. Now, unfortunately, it's centralized, and unfortunately, everyone's trusting a third party. But as in the fiat world, we know we're dealing with inflation. Well, gold was inflating in value, so people were starting to get used to it and was catching on because people were starting to transact in gold on the internet. Amazing story, right? So again, they started in 2006. In 2000 to 2004, the platform grew in popularity substantially, and their transactions grew significantly, but they were also started to get attention because hackers and malware were starting to go after them. They were using, it's funny, and someone in the chat put goldbacks, exactly. Yeah, that's right, Saint Germain. But it was fascinating because they were starting to see these attacks, malware and all kinds of other things. It was just a different time. It was the beginnings in the early stages of the internet, what we had. So
yeah, the timing of this is, I'm sorry to interrupt. The timing of this is incredible, considering it's like he knew the crash was coming in 2008. And knew that we needed, instead of like the story with Satoshi that I always hear is the crash happened in 2008 and Satoshi was birthed out of that. But this actually was created before that. And then they were arrested and whatever happened to them, we're about to find out. You're going to tell us more.
That's right.
The timing of this is very interesting.
So, gold-backed currency, what a novel idea. Who would have thought that?
I think it's in the Constitution, but
yeah.
Or actually, that's silver, right?
Yeah. That's right. So anyway, what happened was FinCEN, or the U.S. Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, began probing and looking at what they were doing, and they were falling under scrutiny. Now, get this. Their entire existence, all along the way, they would get contacted by Scotland Yard or by Pakistan, because they started working all over the world. All over the world, people were using their services, and they were working with law enforcement right away. And what's hilarious is, back in the day, it was Microsoft Windows Explorer was the web browser, and it had holes and cracks in it from security, and they were always trying to plug those cracks and holes, and different agencies around the world was also helping them, saying, hey, watch out for this crack, watch out for this hack, watch out for this bug. So they were kind of helping them, because they were also providing them with information on, hey, this person is using our service and we're not sure how they're using it. Or they would get a warrant, and sometimes they would answer it before the warrant was physically received. They would say, oh yeah, we'll give you that information. They even helped start up and funded from a charitable a way to try to stop like pornography, child pornography, all of these things. So they were fighting against that.
You're saying Microsoft is fighting against that?
No. eGold.
Okay, thank you.
eGold
was like, I don't think that's accurate.
Yeah. eGold was helping like Scotland Yard and other in law enforcement bodies were contacting them saying, hey, can you help us track down so and so? We think that they're using your service. Sure, they would help them out.
Awesome. When they saw criminal behavior, then they did comply or whatever. That's very interesting, because like some people would say even that is spying or against your privacy or whatever, but you're using their platform and it is centralized. So if they don't want to be a part of something like that, you would think, just like you can refuse the right to service in a small business, to someone, then you could choose to refuse the right to service.
Right. So they were working with various countries and their law enforcement arms or Department of Justice to find and fight criminals and this kind of thing, to try to keep things honest. And they were working with FinCEN and everyone else, where they kept butting their heads, and it was almost adversarial, was the Secret Service. The U.S. Secret Service was giving them problems. And they would actually talk to other agencies, FBI, or the FBI would contact them about some kind of investigation. And the FBI would tell them, yeah, Secret Service, I don't know what's wrong with them. They're kind of like a rogue agency, because we'll be on a case and we're staking it out. We're gathering up all the evidence, and we're maybe 6-7 months into that, and Secret Service will step in, and then they'll just arrest somebody in the middle of it. And there goes all of our work to try to get the people at the top. It was like the Secret Service was working against these agencies, and certainly against them. And they were trying to work with the Secret Service, but they didn't want to do it.
Well, you had told us previously, which I was not aware of this, that the Secret Service was originally to protect the currency.
Right. And I think that's where their hostilities were, because they were considered, really, to be honest with you, a currency. So it was a direct attack on the dollar. If you think about it, everything that they were transacting in was gold backed. The US dollar is not gold backed.
Right.
And they were running into that trouble. So the US government, actually, the founders were trying to work with the government. And in 2007, they a grand jury was convened. They were informed that they were probably going to be facing some indictments. And they were charged with indictments in 2008 and 2007, and one of them was conspiracy to engage in money laundering, operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. Wow. And see, their biggest customers were actually people who were working abroad and sending money back to their home country. International payments. Western Union didn't like it.
That's who I was thinking would be their biggest competition, because the fees are so crazy high with Western Union. And back then there just weren't really alternatives for people sending, especially out of country.
Right. And guess who also didn't like it? The banks certainly didn't like it
Oh, I'm sure.
because they could process a payment much faster than a bank wire, and they didn't. And it was gold backed. It was international transmission. It wasn't an international bank wire, which can take days. Um, and the banks didn't like them. And well, guess what? They're calling it a currency. So Secret Service, well, we're charged with protecting the U.S. dollar, and these folks are basically counterfeiting the dollar. And well, they weren't counterfeiting the dollar by no means, and those charges didn't stick. But in the end, they agreed to plead guilty rather than fight it. And the judge was like, okay, well, I'm going to give you just a slap on the face because you obviously have shown that you've worked tirelessly year after year with numerous countries, numerous law enforcement agencies, and the regulatory clarity just wasn't there. Okay. And you were given bad advice from an attorney. And there's a new book has come out, and I haven't found or read it yet, but it documents the story and says that they were on such the cutting edge that there was no regulatory writings for this. And we talked about the Chevron doctrine. These experts that were supposed to enforce this didn't exist. This was new territory. And so I think the judge kind of felt that. And so the judge, she allowed the other two to just plead guilty to operating without a money's transmitting license. One of them was an attorney in Maryland, and he pleaded with the state bar to not take his state license from him because he was in Maryland and their offices were in Florida, and he had nothing to do with the day-to-day. And the state bar agreed that while the charges were serious, he wasn't truly involved in this, and they allowed him to keep his license. But our principal was facing 20 years in prison and incredible amounts in fines in the millions and millions of dollars. And he was pleaded guilty to basically two charges. One was the not having them. It wasn't counterfeiting. I bear with me, but it was something to that effect. It was is money transmitting and not a conspiracy type charge. But they had now. Let's plug in how we look at today's world with Bitcoin or Litecoin or whichever blockchain network you want, and look how they handled things. They had transaction fees. They had account maintenance fees, which you could say that's kind of like the miners, right?
Okay.
They had gold storage fees.
Is it gas?
Yeah. Currency conversion fees, which think of doing a swap, swapping Bitcoin to Litecoin or something like that. And they had interest on reserves. Now, there's no charge on interest on reserves, but they charge like a 1% annual fee for interest on reserves. So nobody bought eGold to speculate on gold. eGold was just a payment operation. Okay. So they charged you if you just kept your money parked in their account. They didn't want that. They wanted you to use their service. They wanted kind of like Litecoin, use it. Don't just hodl it. So I thought that was interesting. So obviously they became a big target because they were disrupting a lot of things and they were gold backed. And get this, in 2001, they had 200,000 accounts, but by 2004, they had over 1 million accounts.
Wow.
And at its peak in 2006, they processed over $2 billion in transactions in 2006 money. $2 billion. Wow. And in 1 year, and they had $85 million worth of gold in their vault, or 3.8 tons back then. So they weren't small by any means. They grew big with hardly any advertising. They didn't have money to advertise. So why did they fail? Well, it's one thing is obviously they're centralized, and regulatory capture was not even a thing. It was regulatory smash and grab, because they forfeited, they seized their assets, they seized their gold. And even though it didn't belong to eGold was
I was going to say that wouldn't that be, oh, you know what they do though? Then they do a fair fund, and they tell you that they will return it to the owners, but it's very difficult to get your property back. And they usually give it to you in the US dollar when they give it back, not your kind
right
investment.
Now, and if a company goes bankrupt, you're lucky if you get 10 cents on the dollar, right? Well, these folks actually, those that were able to get their money back, they got made in dollars, but they had to pay. Their gold was 4 or 5 times the amount, so they actually made money 400-500% on the money that was held on those that were able to get it back from eGold. But it was 8 years later, 9 years later, some of them.
Wow. Crazy.
Now, this guy called it a syndicate. He said that the Secret Service acted like a syndicate for private corporations to shut them down. And I believe it. If you want to start getting more, this Dr. Jackson, he talked about the FBI and the FinCEN. They weren't so difficult at all to work with, but it was the Secret Service. And when they came down on him, he called it a private cabal. He was calling the U.S. Secret Service a private cabal. Now, this is after the fact. This was in a podcast I heard him being interviewed just 4.5 years ago. And he said that essentially they were, I think, he was saying it in between the lines, you read between the lines, they're corrupt. They were corrupt. They were there to shut him down. And it's just sad. And I have the judgment details. They're posted in DEN. If you want to click on this, you can read the judgment that was against them. But here's what was funny. The judge told him, well, go ahead and just fix these, register as a license with all 50 states and then go about your business. Well, now that he had a felony conviction,
he couldn't.
He lost the trust and he had a conviction. He couldn't get those money licenses. So he could never reestablish eGold. The judge specifically said, I'm not here to close it down. I don't want it closed down because I want the people to get their gold back. I just want you to go out there and become compliant with the law. And therefore, I'm not sentencing you to prison time, just an ankle bracelet and some restitution payments.
And they knew that just in that they would destroy him. He could never go file for those licenses. So now
he didn't know that. He didn't know that. He thought he was going to be able to start right back up.
Oh my goodness.
So the issues were, it was a private company. It was centralized. They even used Microsoft SQL Server for their database for all their accounts and stuff.
But it was basically like an email system. Sending in invoices or exchanging the transactions or whatever.
Right.
Wow.
He was being regulated to death. And if he tried to get back, he found that now the regulations were in place because the government learned how to stamp out competition to the dollar. And hence, I think where he says Satoshi wouldn't exist had he been successful, maybe. But on the other hand, he would have been fighting constantly regulation. Fees would have gone up because it would have been more costly to implement those new regulations. And but there you have it. You have a single point of failure. And unfortunately, he still hasn't learned. He still, 4 years ago, wanted to reconstitute some form of eGold and play by the rules, play by the regulations. And even though he's calling out the Secret Service for what they did to him, and he ended up in a divorce, all kinds of horrible stories you can only imagine. But nation states don't want any competition to their fiat, right? So
I'm kind of surprised he didn't just go outside the US. There's a lot of projects that I see that, Americans are really left behind when it comes to innovation and especially anything technology because of all this, over-regulation and overreach by the three-letter agencies. I'm just surprised he didn't just continue operating outside.
you would think, right? As being such a smart man, there's something I forgot. I skipped over, and I got to read this to you.
Okay.
Look at this. In 1999, the Financial Times wrote, the only electronic currency that has achieved critical mass on the web. That was in July 1999 by Financial Times.
Wow.
Talking about e-gold.
That is significant. And how sad that the government is looking for ways to suppress our freedom to transact.
So if you want to hear this man and his intellect share his experiences and how e-gold worked, you can find it on YouTube on Did You Know podcast. It's Did You Know cast 649 or whatever. Just look it up. E-gold and Did You Know podcast. You'll find it. Brilliant man, brilliant interest. And he taught me essentially how you can tokenize something, is really listening to him. And then I hear things about Zeno, and I like what Zeno's doing about tokenizing assets. And that's kind of how I stumbled into this. A Wired article, and that's one of those images I have, and Wikipedia, of course. And then, of course, credit where credit's due is to you, Lisa, and everyone watching and listening.
Well, thank you. So I'm glad to have you on here. I love talking about new ideas and for us to, keep thinking outside the box and thinking of those freedom opportunities. I do think they might need to talk to Reggie and get a partnership. That would be a great thing. But it will be exciting to see this. I would love to see it without the middleman, without that third party. And I think that's where maybe Reggie's patents come in and help clean that up. But the more great minds we can have thinking like this and looking for solutions, the better off we all will be.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better.
I love
it.
But
there you have it. I rolled up my sleeves to give you the e-gold story.
I love it. I love learning new stuff and learning about this history of money and transacting and how crypto came about. I think all of these pieces had a part to play. So you guys, please join us on the Mighty Layer in DEN.social. Dayrox, I apologize. I saw your comment and just upvoted it recently. We had kind of a crazy weekend, but I wanted to thank you for participating in the Mighty Layer, and I will be sending you a lot, which is a layer ownership token.
Dayrox, you rock.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer his post too after the show.
Okay,
so,
great.
Hey, everybody, check it out. Go to DEN.social. Earn crypto.
And speak freely.